So I was given the opportunity to do an internship in El Cajon, California, and it was a worship internship. I was called to lead worship there, and I remember leaving. I just felt like I was in the center of God's will. Like there was nothing else for me to be doing at that time other than what I was going to do there. So I flew out, and I'm from Turbeville, South Carolina. So going out that far away was extremely scary for me because it was completely across the country, and I just didn't know if I was ready for that or not, but I knew that God was calling me, so I decided to go. I remember one day, it was about a month into my internship. Before I got on stage to lead worship, I was reading in scripture, and it was Psalm 116:7, which is, "Be still once more, O my soul, for the Lord has been good to you." And I remember reading that before I got on stage, and I was like, wow, that's a really good word to go off of before I go and lead worship. And I didn't realize then that God was preparing my heart for what was to come. I was around the pool with my host family, which I was staying with for the whole summer. We were just talking about church and the service and how the worship went and things like that, and then I get this phone call from my dad, and it changed everything. He was extremely just distraught, like he didn't know exactly how to put into words what was going on, and so I had to calm him down. I'm like, just tell me, what's going on, take a breath, what's going on. And he said, your mom's in the hospital and things don't look really good, and it's time for you to come home. As I'm on the flight home, I'm reminded of when I was younger. My mom was actually diagnosed with cancer early on in my life. So she actually almost passed away when I was younger. So this kind of brought back a lot of horrible memories as a little girl too. So I didn't really know what God was trying to do or trying to teach me, or even what he was going to do with the situation. So I go home and I walk into the hospital room the next morning, and I remember I saw my mom on all of these different machines, and things were helping her breathe, and all these things that were helping her body do regular functions that normal people can easily do. And I just remember thinking wow, that's breathing for her, this is helping her digest her food, and it just seemed so unreal. Seeing her like that, I just got extremely frustrated with God, because this is obviously the second time in my life that I've seen this and seen her in this state. And I just did not know why God was doing something like that to someone so important to me. At this point, I was just like, God, just spare her. Because by that time, the doctors were telling us, we don't know what in the world's going to happen with her. We don't even know how to explain her case. I went home, like I said, and I was just extremely frustrated with God, because I had no idea why we were in this place and why he took me from being what I thought was in the center of his will back home into this situation. I remember talking to my dad about it on the way home, and I was just like, I don't understand why God allows these kinds of things to happen. And he just kept saying, God has a plan, God has a plan. And I was like, yeah, sure, I've heard that plenty of times before. I thought on Psalm 71, and God really convicted my heart after praying so much about just sparing my mom. He really convicted my heart of me having a change in mindset. Psalm 71 actually is David in his old age, and he's kind of looking back on his life. And he says, "But as for me, I'll always have hope. I'll praise you more and more. My mouth will tell of your righteousness, of your salvation all day long, though I know not its measure. And I will come and proclaim your mighty acts, O sovereign Lord. I will proclaim your righteousness, yours alone. Since my youth, O God, you've taught me, and to this day I will declare your marvelous deeds." And in reading that, I was just extremely convicted. Constantly throughout the week, my prayer was changing, and it was evolving into something more sufficient with him instead of my own desires. And so by the end of the week, I looked back on my prayer and how much it had changed from the beginning of the week. At the beginning of the week, it was, God, please spare my mom. And by the end of the week, it was, your will be done. I'm just going to be still and know that you're God and that you're good, and whatever happens is supposed to happen. I remember just, the days going by or whatever, going and visiting my mom, and gradually my mom was pulled off of these different machines and things like that. I remember just realizing that we got a miracle. And I was just so confused even then, because I was like, why God brings me through all of this just for the same outcome of my mom actually being okay. It was just really confusing to me. And then I realized it was to teach me how to be sufficient with him alone. And despite any situation, and despite any circumstances, to be sufficient, and to know that no matter what, to be still and know that he's God and he's good and he's faithful.